So can you make it gallery view?
Can I make it
gallery view?
I didn't catch what you meant by view. I didn't catch the question.
I understand I'm the only one that can be seen from the participants' point right now.
Okay.
I understand they can only see me.
Okay, so let me just, because I can see everyone.
So
maybe I'll just pin, let me just pin everyone to the, yes, so,
I can see you. I can see you even right now. Maybe our own system has an issue.
Now, I think they should give everyone post rights so that they can. Please help, because it's asking for a replacement of PIN, which I don't think is set up. So please give everyone in the panelists post rights. Okay, we have over 52 people in the room at the moment.
Let's start, please.
My time is 12 o'clock. Okay.
Let's start. Let's start.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, professionals in the industry across the globe. You're welcome to this interesting discourse on legacy and continuity, building a future-ready organization through effective succession planning and management. We have a very concentrated powerhouse in terms of our panelists in the room, and we're going to be looking at them very, very shortly. This is a very interesting topic, especially in times like this, post-COVID, where a lot of organizations are finding it very, very difficult to replace key talent, especially at the leadership level. And that is why we are having this conversation. So a lot of information are going to be passing across. Hopefully, we'll all be able to take something that we'll be able to implement in our organization for performance. And before we go to the facilitators, I would just like to give a quick brief of Human Capital Partners. We are a HR consulting company, and we are hosting this particular program. Now, we have relationship with DDI, TTRO, and AtPlay, and we have invested heavily over the years in succession planning. And a lot of data that we have gathered over the years are part of the things that we are going to be discussing in the session. Human Capital Partners came out of KPMG Executive Selection and Training Arm about 11 years ago. And we have provided services across several industries, be it the fast-moving consumer goods, oil and gas industry, the public sector, and of course, the financial services industry. Now, who are our panelists? The people that will be speaking to us. And I would like you to get your pen and your notepad ready, because there's a lot of information that will be going around. And if you have any question, it would be good to take a good note of it so as to be able to answer the questions when the time comes. I'll start with the first person on my list. He is a former vice chairman, ExxonMobil companies in Nigeria. He has over 33 years of experience. Udom has expertise in corporate governance, human capacity development, leadership, business culture and ethics, national orientation and capacity building. He has received numerous awards and recognition for his professional accomplishment and leadership roles in the petroleum industry, and of course, humanitarian efforts and contribution to the Ibibio community. Udom has anchored several sessions similar to this in conferences, both locally and globally. And he brings a lot of experience to the room. He used to be the executive director and vice chairman of ExxonMobil, and of course, in-country human resource director, general manager, and external resources. And of course, he was the past president of the Chartered Institute of Personnel Management, CIPM, Nigeria. You're welcome to the discourse. The second person on my list of panelists is the CEO of Theta Alpha Consults Limited. She has over 35 years of work experience. Titilayo has spent about 12 years experience in the banking sector. And of course, she has spent several years in the manufacturing sector. And of course, in HR, over 15 years at senior level. Now, prior to her role, she served as the HR director for Coca-Cola Nigeria Limited. And she was the past vice president for Chartered Institute of Personnel Management, CIPM, Nigeria. Her expertise lies in change and transformation management, executive development, talent acquisition, and career management. She is known for her strategic HR business partnering and consulting skills, her proficiency in leadership development and talent management. He is a leadership coach who aims to inspire, empower, and transform current and future leaders. You are welcome to the discourse, Titilayo Akinsoya. The third person on my list is Tope Phillips. He is the recognized HR thought leader with career spanning over 20 years within the FMCG industry. He has expertise in business transformation, people capability development and enhancement, talent management, culture, and change management. He is currently the Cluster HR Director, Sub-Saharan Africa, Friesland Campina, which many of us know as WAMPO Nigeria PLC. Before this, he was HR Director for Cadbury, West Africa. He has served at top leadership position in other organizations, including Tiger Brands. A renowned executive leadership coach, Tope Phillips continues to make significant contributions to key HR strategic initiatives and oversees the operational implementation of strategic HR initiatives in Nigeria. Tope Phillips, you are welcome to the discuss.
Thank you.
From the fintech industry, we have Rennie Odebi. Rennie is the global head talent management at Flutwave. Rennie has over 10 years experience in the industry, and she is a people-centric, people-driven talent leader, responsible for finding, hiring, nurturing, and of course, developing talents globally, both technically and of course in the non-technical role. Prior to her joining Flutwave, Rennie has worked for organizations such as the World Bank Group and of course Chemonics International, focused on identifying and attracting talents for international development related projects. Her experience consists of different talent development roles such as talent acquisition consultant, recruitment associate and manager, and talent attraction specialist in the World Bank, Chemonics International, and International Finance Corporation, IFC, respectively. Rennie holds a Bachelor in Psychology and from the University of Maryland and a Master's degree in Organizational Management from George Washington University. Rennie Odebi, you are welcome to this. From the public sector, we have Abiodun Bangwe. He was the former Permanent Secretary for Local Government Commission. He has over 30 years experience, and he served before the role as Permanent Secretary of Local Government Commission. He was the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Establishment, Training and Pension Office. He has also served in the office of the Head of Service for about 13 years. And in this role, he has been involved in policy making and of course, managing statutory and committee meetings. He's a general administrator, and of course, he has been involved in formulating, executing, and of course, reviewing establishment and training policies in Lagos State. And of course, he has also managed personnel management and management services, among others. Abiodun Bangwe, we're happy to have you in this discourse. Welcome. And last but not the least, I have Innocent Osegi. He is the managing partner for Human Capital Partners. He has over 30 years experience, and his career journey actually spanned across several industries, both the consulting space, the FMCG industry, and of course, because of his role at KPMG as the executive director in KPMG, he had worked for several organizations in the fintech industry. He has also worked for the oil and gas industry. His knowledge involves production planning, logistic management for both small and medium-scale enterprise in the consulting space and in other organizations. Full member of the CIPM, and he was recently the member of the governing council of that organization. He was also the chairman, or he has been the chairman of the professional development and consultancy committee of the institute. He has followership and of course membership with the Society for Human Resource Management, and of course the Institute for Management Consulting of Nigeria and Nigerian Institute of Training and Development. Innocent, you're welcome to this.
Thank you.
All right, so that's our panel, and we are going to dive straight into the conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, I will not fail to recognize you. I have over 69 people in the room here to listen and of course to contribute to questions at the end of the session. You are all welcome to the session. So I'm going to start with the first panelist, Innocent Osege. You'll be taking my first question. But before then, I'd just like to give some ground rules. For those of us who are in the member of the audience or members of the audience, we would like you to take note of your questions. You could type your questions in the question and answer session. All right, sorry, in question and answer slot of this particular webinar. So we will take your questions from there, and of course, we are definitely going to read that out. So please don't type your questions in the chat. You put it in the Q&A section. We'll have 3 rounds of questions, and hopefully by the time we are done, all the issues around succession planning, especially in these contemporary times, would have been addressed. So Innocent Osege, we have the first question for you. Would like to set the tone for this because we have members of the audience who probably don't know what succession planning is. So it'd be very good for us to start off with a healthy foundation around the definition of succession. So your question, what is succession planning and management? And what are the long-term benefits of succession planning and management for an organization?
Thank you very much, Shew. In terms of succession management, it's the strategic process that organizations undertake to identify and to develop future leaders within their ranks. It normally involves creating very systematic approach to ensure that there is a smooth transition of leaders and key roles within current leaders, particularly when current leaders retire or when they move on to other positions or when they leave the organization. So succession planning focuses on identifying high potential employees and grooming them for future leadership positions, particularly the roles that are referred to in an organization as critical roles. And critical roles represent about between 13 and 15% of existing roles within every organization. It goes beyond just filling immediate vacancies, but it aims to actually build very strong leadership pipeline for any organization. So in terms of long-term benefits, it ensures that there is smooth transition of leadership, preserves institutional knowledge, as well as mitigate risks associated with leadership gap in every organization. It allows an organization to identify and develop potential successors, like I said. It also helps to contribute to organizational stability and continuity and long-term success. It also helps to ensure that there is a retention of top talent by providing growth opportunities for people that have been identified. Because it is not at the point where people are leaving an organization that you start telling them that, you are supposed to be on our succession list, which is one of the areas, challenges that some of the my other panelists will be talking about today. It also helps to guide against frenetic hiring or premature promotions, promoting people beyond, because there is no one available to be able to step into the role. We then promote somebody who is not qualified to step in that role. So it guides against premature promotions, because with succession planning is an organized way in ensuring that roles are identified, at least minimum of 2 people have been identified and being developed on a consistent basis. So that's what how I would define succession planning, and of course the long-term benefits of succession planning for organizations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Innocent, for that explicit definition and of course benefits of succession planning. My next question actually goes to Dr. Phillips. And just following on Innocent's explanation, we know that the post-COVID era had brought in a lot of challenges with regards to this. Would like you to tell us some challenges based on your wealth of experience that organizations face when implementing succession planning initiatives, and how do you think they can overcome it? This is a big issue in the mind of talent managers for organizations, especially when it comes to this issue of JAPA syndrome. So we'd like you to tell us what are those things that they can do to overcome the challenges, having identified what they are. Over to you, sir.
All right, thank you very much, Cheryl. For me, from practice, one of the things that I've seen that is a huge challenge in terms of succession planning is making succession planning a total HR responsibility. And then it then absorbs the line management from their roles in terms of succession planning. I think one of the biggest mistakes that as HR practitioners that we've done is to refuse to get line managers involved in this process. Basically, for me, what has worked is the fact that HR become the gatekeeper, but in terms of the total gamut of what is to be done from beginning to the end, the management of succession planning is co-owned by the HR practitioner or the HR business partner and the line manager as well. So one of the biggest challenges is now, if that is not properly done, is that you then find a situation that there's resistance from the line manager in terms of how succession planning should go. Because in the first instance, they probably do not understand how important succession planning is. They don't understand what succession planning is or its importance, and they're not able to partake in the process as well. And then that creates a huge gap between the gatekeepers who are HR people and then the line managers who are the actual owners of the talent within the organization. So until that gap is breached, you continue to have a situation where line managers think it's the responsibility of HR alone, and HR on their own go ahead to also want to manage it alone without creating that involvement. So for me, that is a big challenge. That's the biggest reasons why we don't have buy-in. And that's why you find out at times when succession planning discussions are had, it's neither given sufficient time, neither is it a culture within the organization. It's something that you find tick in the box in most organizations where that situation occurs. It's also the fact that we do not, as HR practitioners, allocate enough resources for succession planning. When I mean resources, I'm talking about, whether it's time, whether it's getting line managers to understand the strategy behind it, and whether it's co-owning the strategy itself. I have found in my career that oftentimes the strategy evolves only from HR and stays with HR. It's not co-owned by the entire business. And when you don't have top leadership buying into succession planning strategy, then it becomes a huge challenge. Now, if we're talking about post-COVID era and the JAPA syndrome, it's very important today that we understand that except this becomes a strategy of the organization, then agility in the organization will be lost. There's no way we can build agility in the organization. There's no way we can sustain the business going forward. Because the key thing for us, if we look at what's happening today, and I can give you an example of where I work today. On the average, right, to JAPA, we lose 10% of key talents. We're losing 10% of key talents, whether in the commercial area of our business, engineering area of our business, and in finance. And if you're losing 10% of your key talents, so I'm not just talking about just talents, I'm talking about key talents, it becomes a huge issue as to how that organization can sustain itself, survive into the future, right? So strategy for succession planning must be equal to strategy for profitability, remaining in business going forward. It must be as important as that. Chief executives, other executives within the organization must own it, not just because it's driven by HR, but it becomes a KPI for each and every person that runs the organization, whether from the executives or to the line management. So what do we do? I think in the process of the conversation that I've had just now, I've been able to maybe profile some of the solutions. One, for me, to be able to eradicate this huge challenge that we have, it must be co-owned. Succession planning must be owned by line management, senior leadership within the organization. It must be allocated the right resources and time. It must be part of the strategy of the organization on what I call a day-to-day basis, particularly if we look at the JAPA syndrome today, which is now cutting across. And let me state this, it's not only about the younger ones today. JAPA syndrome today cuts across the generational cohorts that we have. You find in those times, you used to find women only who will go with their husbands. But my experience in my industry, I have a lot of men today who are ready to abandon work and follow their wives and children outside of this country. So the whole thing is changed. So we must understand that it becomes a part of business strategy going forward to eradicate this huge challenge. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that wealth of information you have shared. If I was going to summarize all of this, it's important that it becomes part of the organizational strategy for sustainability. It's also very important that we must engage stakeholders like line managers. They must co-own the process. And of course, we must dedicate resources, be it time and of course, financial resources to ensure that this sustains the business going forward. Thank you very much for that point you have raised. And then of course, moving forward, we are going to be going into the fintech industry, because if you look at this issue of succession planning, the industry that has the biggest hits are those in the IT related industry. And so Rennie, I'll be coming to you now. What are the key challenges tech companies face in implementing effective succession planning and management strategies? Because I believe that the frequency at which you do this will be really, really high based on the rate of attrition in the IT related industry. So can you share with us what are your challenges, and of course, what are the things you have done to be able to manage them?
Thanks, Shehu. 100%. I mean, if you talk about the technology space today, particularly in the last few years, there have been a lot of changes. But I'd say some of the key challenges that we're facing today, one, obviously everybody is aware the rate at which technology is changing. I mean, let's use a very basic example, ChatGPT. How many years ago or how many months ago did this come up, and it's changing the way in which people are working? So, you know, it's one thing for an organization to implement a strategy. It's another thing for technology to be running 10 times faster than that strategy. So it's really understanding how technology is advancing and how you can build a strategy that is just as agile as the growth and development of technology. My fellow panelists have alluded to this already, but talent shortage. With the development of technology comes that skill gap. And because of that, you're finding that looking for the talent is not necessarily that there aren't people in the markets, but the people with the skill set that you're looking for, or the demand for the skill set exceeds the available supply. And so that is definitely a challenge we're experiencing within the tech sector, finding people who we're able to attract and then retaining them as well, because we're not the only organization, we're not the only industry that is looking for this talent today. Speaking to that, obviously, the competition for the talent, we're not even just talking on a local scale, we're talking globally. I always tell people that, you know, when us at Flutterwave today are losing talent, I'm not just worried about my local competitors, I'm worried about the global competitors as well, and where my people are going, which country they're going. I have some employees who come to me and say they're leaving, and the countries that they're going to, it blows my mind. But again, that's the world that we're in today. Nowhere is inaccessible. With that, again, retention. How exactly are you able to retain those high-performing individuals? You know, what are the benefits that you can offer, cash and kind, in order to retain that talent, so that, again, you're not having these massive gaps within your organization? I think another really important thing that has been, again, alluded to already is talking about culture fit, knowledge transfer, and buy-in. I think, you know, for startups in particular, let me speak to the startup world, the tech world, ensuring that you have the right individuals who buy into the mission and vision of your organization and who are going to help continue to pass along the culture of the organization is very critical. So it's not just about having the technical skills, but the non-technical skills are very important. The soft skills are just as important. And being able to transfer that knowledge from leadership to successors is just as important as you continue to grow in an organization. You know, the idea of succession planning, like has been said, is not just for HR or the people team to maintain. The leadership needs to buy into it as well. When they're building their workforce plans, they need to collaborate with the people team or with the HR teams to ensure that we're establishing a culture that values succession planning and understands how it's going to benefit the organization, no matter how much the strategy may change going forward. But again, we need to ensure that it's a top-down approach when it comes to succession planning. But those are some of the key challenges that the technology sector is experiencing today.
Thank you very much, Rennie, for that insightful piece. One of the major points you made that really struck me was the fact that technology is moving at a pace that is even faster than our strategy could catch up. And of course, it requires a lot of change, personal development, and that can also impact succession planning. Some people can be relevant today as leaders, and because of the change in technology, in the next 2 years, they are not as relevant as they should be. So the development of our leaders in the succession planning pipeline has to be at par with the current reality. Thank you very much, Rennie, for sharing. We're going to be moving into a very interesting industry, which is the public sector, because this industry is quite unique, especially in Nigeria, where there is also the political side of it. Mr. Abiodun Bangboye, you will be answering my next question with regards to that. We all know that the public sector is a bit different in terms of DNA from the corporate sector. What are the challenges of succession planning and management in the public organization and, of course, in government institution?
Thank you very much. And that introduction of the public sector having a different DNA is
okay, it's hanging.
Yes, I think it's a technological challenge. Hopefully he'll get back.
Oh, he's dropped off.
Okay, he's back now.
Okay.
Welcome back. You are muted, sir.
sorry. Yes.
We can hear you now. Please go for it.
I said it's interesting that you are seeing the public sector as having a different DNA. To me, not much difference because we attended the same university. We live in the same environment. It's just that the structure is very big, and that is the very first challenge of succession planning. Great. It's a very big structure. You know, it has all components that private sectors would take separately. We have all components there, but the big one, particularly taking it from the angle of politics, is the conflict between policies and politics. The conflict between politics and policies. Most times, the policies are there, how we should drive succession planning, things to do, etc., etc. But every politician comes in and they are almost often in a hurry to get too many things done, even if it would mean to disregard or to disrepute a structure that is already in place. So the major challenge is that I want to point out for now. But basically, the public service has the same DNA, just like the private sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. In fact, this insight helps to bring to perspective the view of a lot of our members of audience. The size also comes with a lot of challenge. I think I'm seeing that for the first time as well. And the point you made with regards to conflict of politics and policies is a big issue that I'm sure hopefully as we progress, you'll be able to help us with information around how have you overcome these challenges within your stay in the industry. And we'll come to that much later. But thank you very much for the points raised. We'll move from there to Udom. Udom, would like you to answer 2 questions. I think you're the first person to answer the question for us. I'll take the question in quick succession because they are related. What are the key steps to succession planning? Because there are people in our audience who don't even understand the process of it. And then how can organization ensure smooth transition of leadership during the succession planning process? So it's one thing to have the process, it's another thing to have a smooth transition of leadership from one stage of the process to another. I'd like to weigh in on that, sir.
Yeah, let me begin by thanking HCP for focusing on this important element for organizational growth and sustainability. But it is important upfront to note that the bedrock is a solid recruiting process and also ensuring retention and promotion of those who are suitably qualified into positions of responsibilities. Otherwise, there will be a conflict. And as already mentioned by the previous two speakers, Renee and I think Tokwe, it is not an HR responsibility. It has to be stewarded by the entire business line. So given that, there are critical steps that must be taken for any serious-minded organization, and it starts with identifying the positions. Not all positions will require this effort because this is not a walk in the park. These positions must be strategic, senior level or specialized roles, vital to organizations' functioning and success. And there has to be serious efforts focused on assessing talents, not by one person, but it has to be structured and by maybe a committee. Such assessments as performance evaluations, for which we pay lip service. And I like the comment of Abiodun Bambuye, where there is a conflict between politics and policy. Even in private sectors, when it comes to performance management, we pay lip service sometimes. It is such an important aspect of organizational management. Competency assessment has to be thorough, unbiased by managers and supervisors to be able to identify the right candidates, the right individuals, demonstrating necessary skills for advancement, for growth. Having done that, the third point is a focused on strategic development and training of these candidates. Some of us, I mean, when you read out our CV, you're talking about 25, 30 years of experience. It took efforts, training, on the job, off the job for us to be able to get to this level. You cannot just throw people into positions of authority, expect them to function without proper training. And training could include coaching, mentoring, job rotations, assignments, in and out, and exposure to different areas of organizations to broaden their skills and perspectives. And in a country like Nigeria, where government is very important, if you are expecting somebody to be in a certain strategic role, understanding how to interface with government is also very important. Some folks lack, the leadership skills, the intelligence, emotional intelligence to walk into a room full of the Abiodun Bambuyes and know what to say. It's not just PowerPoint. You go in with a PowerPoint. I had this experience. I showed up at a Senate committee hearing some years back. And with packaged PowerPoints. And somebody walked up to me, senator, and said, look, we are not here to listen to this your lies. You people just come in here with data and confuse us. Of course, the PowerPoint had to disappear. So I learned my lesson there. They want to listen to you and they want to be able to explain themselves. Fourth point, for the individual that you've identified, create that path which will enable the candidate to be comfortable on the job and to get to the position or the destination. Ensure that there is honest, timely feedback. That you've identified Udom for a position does not guarantee that Udom will eventually get there. If I'm dropping the ball, let me know early. Be honest to me, because it helps to avoid surprises and it helps the organization not to throw up somebody who is, frankly speaking, unprepared for a role. And when you get to that destination, onboarding is extremely important. You cannot, HCP cannot just replace Innocent. Innocent has taken years, to work within and to build a reputation outside. So if you are bringing in a moderator, Shehu, to replace Innocent, there has to be a thorough onboarding. Otherwise, the guy is just going to be inadequate in his performance, Note that early days are likely to be rough for any successor. And being able to help that person move forward is extremely important. So how can an organization ensure a smooth leadership transition during the succession plans? First, ensure that there's an effective knowledge transfer. Get the person prepared. Provide ample transition time for onboarding the incoming, leader. Don't just rush it. Facilitate open communication channels to address concerns or questions during the transition period. Those questions may actually be coming from the organization, because some may be wondering why Ms. A and not Mr. B. And you need to explain that. And that way, you kind of mitigate the challenges that may erupt. We often hear the cliche that people resist change. That's not correct. What people resist is a change that creates a loss. The moment people realize that something is giving way, something not positive, not complementary, whether at an individual level or organizational level, they will resist. But if you take time to go through this process and have the right person in place, everybody's going to embrace that person, including the changes the person will bring about. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that explicit explanation of the process. And just for the audience, there are 5 stages that has been mentioned, a very important foundation of recruitment, and of course, unbiased selection process. And then of course, an identification of the right talent. So it has to be focused. It's not everybody that goes through a succession planning. And of course, they must have a robust training and development plan in place to develop the people. And there must be engagement in terms of giving timely feedback. And the process of giving feedback must be in an environment that is healthy. And last but not the least that you have mentioned, there must be an onboarding of the successor. In other words, to ensure that there is a smooth transition. Thank you very much, sir, for that explicit explanation. Last but not the least, I'm going to call on Titi. You will be taking the next question. And because of your vast experience across several industries, a lot of people do succession planning the way they like. Now, some have succeeded, some have not. There are structured and unstructured ways by which some people have done succession planning. Could you share some best practices or strategies for identifying and developing potential successors within an organization?
Okay, thank you very much, Shehu, and thank you very much, HCP, for inviting me to be amongst this distinguished panelists. And I know why I say distinguished, because there's some faces I haven't even seen in a while. So thank you, HCP, for this. In answering your question, I want to start by saying, first of all, let us understand that succession planning is a strategic process. It's a strategic process. It's not something that's done haphazardly. It's planned, it's strategic. And in listening to the panelists earlier, Tokwe mentioned that word strategic 8 times. Udom mentioned that word 4 times. Yes, I took note, right? So let me start by saying, because succession planning is a strategic process, it has to start, best practice says, it starts with identifying the future leadership needs of the organization. Once the future leadership needs of the organization is well identified, the next thing is, what are these positions? And Udom mentioned that as well when he was speaking a short while ago. So the strategic nature of this process requires us to plan ahead. And it starts with identifying the future leadership needs. That makes it best practice in its sense, as well as the positions that we want these leaders to fill. And then best practice now says, obviously you need to put in place a good talent review process or talent review mechanism. I think it was Tokwe earlier that mentioned that for this to work, succession planning must be a KPI for all leaders within an organization. So there's good focus from that top level when it comes to succession planning. So best practice is about establishing the talent review process. And why is that necessary? It's to enable the organization identify high potentials. I don't like using that word. In my days in Coca-Cola, we used it a lot. High potentials. But after a while, it became so worn out that the high potentials started walking around with chips on their shoulders. So I don't like using that word. But yes, best practice says you must identify the high potentials within the organization. And then another best practice is have a focused, or in HR we call it targeted development plan and opportunities, so that we can measure what is going on long time. Again, Udom mentioned this. He talked about mentoring and coaching. And within my space as an executive and leadership coach, I really know the importance of this. And so best practice is also still about using mentoring and coaching to handhold the leaders as they grow in this succession planning pipeline. And then, of course, being able to promote a culture of continuous learning and continuous career growth is also part of best practice. But more so, all these things I've said is well encapsulated or glued together with a competency framework. A competency framework is the glue that harnesses some of these best practices I've highlighted. A lot of companies pay lip service to it because they don't quite understand what it is to start with. Most people just say competency, well, knowledge, skills, and attitude. By the way, just as a slight an aside, I say knowledge, skills, and attitude as a Lagosian. I'm sure Mr. Bangoye will agree with me. When you say KSA, what comes to mind? It's King Sunny Ade. But anyway, knowledge, skills, and attitude, or attributes or behaviors are those things we talk about when it comes to competencies. But having a framework, a competency framework in place that glues all of these things I've said together, it's by far the best practice that I can bring to share with the audience today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Titi, for that information shared. I was taking a lot of note as we're speaking, especially when you mentioned the fact that competency framework is the glue that holds all of the best practices together. You talked about the fact that there must be an organizational future need that has to be identified first, because many of us in HR, we focus more on the template of succession planning, and we do not remember that that template fits into a strategic organizational plan. And so that came very, very strongly for us. Thank you so much for that. All right, so we are done with the first round, and there are some questions already in the room. But we'll run the second round of questions, and then we'll open the question lines for the audience to ask. The first question goes to Innocent again. So we are in the second round, and thank you very much, my panelists, for answering the questions for the first round. Innocent, I have two questions, even though one question has been answered somehow, but we will still ask the second one, which I believe is more critical for our times. What roles does diversity and inclusion play in succession planning? And how can organizations ensure a diverse pool of potential successors? All right. You are muted, Innocent, so you may probably need to unmute.
Okay, thank you very much, Cheryl, for that question. The role that diversity and inclusion plays in succession planning, it's extremely important. Diversity and inclusion, they are very essential because, number one, it brings variety and perspectives to what you are doing. It enhances innovation as you go on. It also fosters a culture of fairness and equity. So to enhance a diverse pool of potential successors for any organization, the first thing is to implement an inclusive talent management practices. Make it inclusive. Provide equal access to developmental initiatives, developmental opportunities for everyone. Actively address the biases in the selection process, because sometimes there are all manner of biases introduced into selection process. So it just completely skews the people an organization recruit to certain specific type of individual. So address the biases in selection process and ensure that it's open and it can bring in, all varied talents. Then you also need to create monitoring programs that promote diversity constantly. For instance, we know of a number of organizations right now that have specific programs that helps to ensure that women, to constantly ensure that women are constantly being developed. And they just call it Women Leadership Program. It's run as a special program in a number of organizations. A lot of the multinationals have that program in place right now to ensure that there is equal opportunity for everyone. And of course, you need to track, every organization needs to track its diversity metrics in succession planning efforts to ensure representation and equitable opportunities are available for all. And but the thing is that we must always ensure that communication is going on for transparency, for aligning expectations, for reducing uncertainty among employees. And when communications are held very well, tied to your diversity program, you will see that you'll be able to engage employees well. You'll be able to gain their trust. And of course, you'll also be able to provide that supportive environment for development and advancement of opportunities. But it's very important that every organization must ensure that, its diversity program is in place to ensure that it's also carried into their succession plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Innocent, for helping us understand the relationship between diversity, inclusion, and of course, succession planning. And one major point you made is that we must consistently watch the dashboard, of our of our diversity matrix, so that we are sure that it is balanced across board, especially in view of succession planning. So thank you very much for that. My next question goes to Dr. Phillips, because we found situations where people are skewed in one direction. Some organizations are very quick to buying talent than developing talents. And there are some organizations that they tilt more towards developing talents and, of course, succession planning. And we are not absolutely sure where the balance should be. So the question here is, how do you balance the need for external talent recruitment with internal succession planning efforts in an organization?
Well, thank you, Shehu, for that question. It's something that has been on my mind for a while, because one of the things that I really fight against in the subject of succession plan is that it has become a cliche, and it has become a subject that people, managers want to pick from the shelf and then just throw it to the organization. So for me, when you talk about balancing internal recruitment and external recruitment, I'll be very simplistic in my answer, and I'll be very controversial as well. It's as simple as run your succession planning well, then you can balance it. Very simple. It looks too simple for a question like that. But you see, the fact is, oftentimes when we manage this process of succession planning, we have taken it to be only top-down approach. But I dare to be different, to say that your succession planning manual strategy must be a fit for purpose. It's not something that is picked from the shelf and then you want to roll it by the organization. Let me share what I mean by that. So it's not going to be top-down approach. It's also going to be bottom-up. And I'll give you a very good example that happened to us. Most of us in Nigeria know that some banks some time ago, they battled with the Japa syndrome. And for a week, if you look at banks now, they want to reduce part of their KPIs for profitability, want to reduce brick and mortar halls, because a lot of banking is done online now. You're providing a lot of convenience and all of that. And now I want you to think about the situation where at the time when banks are striving to do this, it's no longer the big deal now to say, well, I have branches everywhere in the world, in the country. It's a big deal that I can provide services for people anywhere they are. That's a big deal for banks now. So I want to imagine the situation we had about some months ago, when for a week, customers could not transact business. Do you know why? Because the low-end people, so-called, in the IT part of the banks, suddenly left for Canada. And banks had to come out to make apologies to their customers that, sorry, we lost some people from this department and so on. And these were not the top executives. So for me, if you're looking at succession planning today, it has to be fit for purpose, right? As you're doing it top down, you are doing it bottom up, okay? So if you adopt that approach, it becomes easier for you to deal with your realities. Now, if I talk about the FMCG where I have worked most of the times in my life, what I find now is that the destructive part of the business in terms of talent management or succession management is not even the executives. They are more stable in terms of being around. And then, over the years, you have created a policy and a practice that allows you to bring in the best people you have ready now in 1 year, ready now in 2 years, ready now in 3 years for that. But we have also neglected the other part of the business where they become very critical only when you lose them. Now, let me share a personal example. I have lost very good salesmen who have not even moved out of Nigeria to Canada to work. But right now, they work in Nigeria and do sales in Canada. It's extreme. Is it happening? Yes. So should I put focus in terms of succession management in that area? My answer also is yes. So that's why I'm saying it's not an off-the-shelf solution any longer. It's a top-down, but mostly if you look at what we're faced with, Japa syndrome, what we are faced with now, it's also a bottom-up approach. Now, what I have done in terms of balancing both is to use the employer value proposition approach. What is, as an employer, our value proposition to everybody who works for us on the internal and who is a potential talent for us, all right, on the external. And so what we do is to make sure that for every role that we have defined, and again, I have expanded the borders of critical roles. So for me, critical roles is no longer the executive roles. Critical roles are roles that I call high-risk, high-flight roles. Today, we have identified high-flight roles in the organization. These are roles that on a daily basis, you train them, you spend money on them, and organizations wait for you to finish and they pick them the next day, and they will put, no matter how much salary or remuneration, benefits, compensation, they will add something on it and they take them from you. So high flight roles. So again, scarce skill roles, right? There are roles in the organization that you don't readily find the skills. I mean, if you are looking for an actuarist, for example, if you run an insurance business, it's a role that is very, very difficult to get. So again, how do I manage succession planning around that? So the borderline for me in terms of critical roles is not just senior roles any longer. It's all these roles that are classified into scarce skill roles, roles that are classified into high flight roles, and then strategic roles. So that is the way I've wrapped my hand around that. And then to then say, how do I balance it? Now, one of the key things that we have put in place, or that I have used in the past years, is to make sure that the internal organization, the current employees, in terms of what we call their experience once they join us, what is their experience once they join us, right? Is extremely important. So you find that not only do they become my ambassadors within the organization, also outside the organization. So we have policies that pay employees. When we don't have talents in-house to get into a role, we have policies that pays the employee a certain amount of the remuneration of the talent that this employee can source for us on the outside. So he's not necessarily begrudged any longer that you are bringing people from the outside into roles that people on the inside can fill, because the process has become very open. We have a situation where for all of these roles that I've just identified, whether they're scarce skill roles, whether they're high flight roles, whether they're strategic roles, we have identified over the years which of these roles that we have talent within, and which of these roles that we do not have talent within that we need to source on the outside. And so to a large extent, the line managers know about it. And so when we advertise for roles that we can't fill within, and they have to come from the outside, we also financially motivate our employees. They become our ambassadors to help us get the right talents from the outside, okay? So the grudge that you have, when employees keep complaining that, oh, you're just for this role, they know that you don't have the right set of skills within, and that's why we're going on the outside. And so we not rigidly follow that policy to say for every role that is going to be vacant or that is available, already on the site, we know whether we have an internal cover or we will need to go on the external. And this is very open on the site for everybody to see. So you already know that for this role, yeah, we don't think we have the right skills within, and so we're going to go out. For this role, yes, we believe we have the right skills within, and we have identified the process of bringing the right skills within on the inside. And even when we have to bring from the outside, the employee is also our ambassador, you know, to be able to help bring in these talents from the outside. So that is one approach that I think has worked in my experience for the organizations that I've worked for. But balancing it, like I said, very simple. Run succession planning right. Make succession planning the DNA of the organization. It's not just a bottom-down approach. It's also a bottom-up approach. So that when you create a culture where everybody knows as part of your KPI, you know, you need to deliver it, whether as top leadership members, but even for those line managers who are, say, I mean, middle level of managers, it becomes what we call, we have in my organization currently what we call your people target. What you have a target that allows you or ensures that you deliver to people, key people issues in the whole of the year that you are also judged for. Okay, right. So for me, that's the way I would like to answer the question. A bit controversial, is no longer off the shelf. Succession planning is now a fit for purpose for every organization.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for that explicit explanation. In fact, if I had given you 20 minutes, we'll continue to go on and on based on the experience you've shared. But something very important here is that it is no longer just leadership role. There are strategic roles, there are critical roles that needs to be filled at all levels. So it's not just top down, it's also bottom up. Thank you very much for sharing. Rennie, I'll be coming to you for the next question. And this time I'll really need to beg my panelists. We really need to work within the time frame, but we're running out of time now. And I'm sure my audience are looking forward to asking questions. So we'll be going shortly into the question and answer session. All right, now, Rennie, what strategies can tech companies employ to create a talent pipeline and reduce the risk of leadership gap, knowing fully well the peculiarities in the tech industries? What would you advise with regards to this?
Thanks again, Drew.
Thank you.
Although we're focusing on tech companies, I don't think the strategies are only for tech companies. I think a number of the panelists today have already alluded and touched upon this. The most important one is internal development. Continue to upskill your talent. I always say that learning is not one directional. I think of it in the letter T, horizontal and vertical learning. You can learn in your specific stream of specialty, but also just cross collaboration across products, projects, cross-functional. Again, any way to continue to upskill and upskill yourself and your talent is important. I think developing internal development programs, mentorship, for example, leadership training, as Ms. Sisi said, high potential employees, and I put quotes around high potential employees for what that looks like. Because again, high potential doesn't only allude to leadership today. It could be future leadership, but starting to identify the skills and the talents that could potentially lead, become leaders, or that could lead to the right leadership is what we need to embrace today. I think another thing is continuing to do succession planning reviews. With the way that technology is evolving, one thing every company has to be is agile. So continuously reviewing your succession planning. You can't say I'm doing it this year and waiting for another 5 years, because what's happening today and what's happening in 5 years, who knows? Always assessing the readiness and potential of your employees for that next step, that next stage. When we look at performance management, we look at progression as well as promotion. How can we continue to help employees progress through the workforce, regardless of whether or not they're ready for promotion? It's that constant progression that is going to lead the promotion to the point where they can become leaders tomorrow. As I mentioned, the cross-functional exposure. Allow people to learn different departments, different products, different projects, allow them to broaden their skill sets, allow them to have a better understanding of the business as a whole. So their skill set is not only siloed in one specific direction. And then again, continuous talent acquisition. I always say talent acquisition versus recruitment, because talent acquisition has to be strategic. What are the relationships that you're developing? Who are you reaching out? Where are your talent pools? How are you building your talent pipelines? How can you continue to partner and collaborate to ensure that you have a wide enough pool of potential successors, so that it's not a last minute reactive action of the organization, but instead you're being proactive. That's essentially how you can avoid those gaps in leadership and across the organization.
Thank you very much, Rennie, for the points made, especially everything mentioned has a lot to do with talent acquisition and talent development. A lot of people believe it's just one-sided, in-class training and all of that. But we've talked about some other aspect of development that has more to do with the vertical and the horizontal development of skills, transfer of skills as a result of project exposure. So thank you so much for that. I'll be going to Abiodun for the next question, and we are honestly running out of time, so I'll really run as quickly as we can. Abiodun, the political sector again is coming up. In succession planning, is succession planning actually feasible in the public sector? And the reason why this question is being asked is because there is an overlap between the political, like you have mentioned earlier and established, and the policies of the public sector. And we know that there is a lifespan for every political era. It's about 3 to 4 years, and then we have a new set of government, just like you have even mentioned earlier. So is it actually possible for the public sector institution to have succession planning in the midst of all of this?
Thank you very much. And I want to say I've been enjoying every contribution. And this question basically is a simple, straightforward one. Succession planning exists in the public service, and we can take it even from the point of the structure of the service. The service is structured in hierarchical pattern that we take issues. When we talk of bureaucracy is top-bottom, bottom-up strategy. Everybody in that line must have an input, and through it, you are learning from and also building yourself up to the competencies required to take higher responsibilities. So basically, the structure of the public service is really assisting succession planning there, notwithstanding the turbulence of policy versus politics. Because when they come in that manner, the first thing they do is possibly see what the previous occupant had done as not too good, or they throw away the baby even with the bathwater. That's when you see they clear everywhere and they bring in some new people. But the truth of the matter is the structure is helping sustain it. Because you can't, like I said, it's a big structure, and we move in that hierarchy. We also contribute in that hierarchy, and sometimes even bring ideas through the hierarchy. So it's complementary, and it helps on the job capacity enhancement. So for succession planning, the strength of it is that you learn every bit from every little opportunity you are exposed to in the service. And it's so beautiful because it will pass through you, except you are lazy or you are trying to dodge responsibility. It will pass through you. Either when it's coming from up to you down. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that insight, Abiodun. Really appreciate that point, especially with regards to the structure. Once we have a structure, then of course, it really doesn't matter where we are having change of political leaders. Thank you very much for that. All right, Udom, we are coming to you very quickly. I have someone who have raised his hand. We'll be taking questions very, very shortly, but I'll just like you to answer just in 2 minutes. What safety measures do we put in place when embarking on succession planning and management? Are there risk factors we need to consider? Are there safety measures we also need to put in place? So people don't leave here saying, oh, succession planning is fantastic. And we are, like we have established, there are the issue that there are the finance aspect of it. There are resources that need to be committed into it. So are there risks? And if there are, what are the safety measures we need to put in place?
Obviously, there are risks, but a couple of safety guards. Confidentiality is very important. You identify people, you don't want them walking around, thinking they are the best thing to have happened after sliced bread. Otherwise, they could derail the organization. The criteria has to be very objective. There has to be transparency in providing feedback and ensuring that the person is properly stewarded. Equal opportunity is also very important. That has already been mentioned. I've talked about transparency. What else? You want to be sure that there is an important governance structure. Other folks have talked about this. I can't re-emphasize that. It is not an HR responsibility. It is a line responsibility, but the line also has to be properly, put together to have the right people at the highest level being in that committee. When I was working in ExxonMobil, we had all the directors, and the MD stewarding this particular matter. So it was such an important thing for everybody to attend meetings quarterly and be prepared to talk about each of the candidates. Continuous evaluation and adjustment must be done.
If things are not going well, don't be embarrassed. Feel free to make adjustments. Because at the end of the day, what you really want to focus on, and I must, given my own background and experience, the most important thing is organizational success. And in the oil and gas, at some point, we also realized that we had to meet legal and regulatory expectations, especially with the Nigerian Local Content Law of 2010. So stewardship was extremely important, but we couldn't do it in such a way that would derail the organization. So organizational success is the most critical factor. And you must put some guardrails to be sure that you get the success that you want. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Organizational success is the critical factor. Thank you very much for sharing that. And I come to you, Titi, for your question. I would actually put two questions together for you, Titi, if you don't mind. Because this is a question we gathered from the pool of our professionals in HR. The very first one has to do with the dashboard. We talked about the dashboard of succession planning. People don't know exactly what to measure. It's only when the deed is done that they find out that, oh, our succession planning is not working well. Are there metrics? And this is the question, okay? What are the specific metrics and indicators that organizations should consider when evaluating the effectiveness of a succession planning program? And that is the first question. And if you don't mind, I'll take the next. The first one has to do with metrics and, of course, indicators. And the second question is, in what areas will an organization find the services of an external HR consulting firm useful in succession planning?
Okay, let me start with the first question that talks about what are those specific metrics or key performance indicators that organizations would consider to evaluate how effective the succession planning within the organization is. Well, in no particular order, or even before I answer that, let me say, I hope once we start talking about metrics or succession planning or even dashboards, we're going into an aspect of what Rennie talked about earlier, which is about performance management. So your metrics or your indicators must also mean that you have a good performance management system in place. So in no particular order, some of the metrics that come to mind that we can consider in evaluating the effectiveness of a good succession planning program would be, for example, the percentage of internal promotions to the leadership promotions, leadership positions. Remember, I had said, first you start with the future leadership needs and then those positions. So you want to measure the percentage of internal promotions to leadership positions. It will also be necessary to measure your retention rates. Your retention rates of, well, I dare say some of those your high potentials, right? And then another indicator would be the level of engagements, employee engagements, and employee satisfactions within the organization. And you can dimension this even with certain key leaders or even certain critical departments. And then of recent, in the last few years, you must measure, there must be a metrics around diversity. Diversity. And today's world, it's not just about diversity, it's also about diversity and equity. And then, of course, the inclusiveness aspect of the particular leader. So inclusiveness is now a competency that we can use in measuring how effective the leader or the line manager is. Another important metrics obviously will be the time to fill the critical roles. So, or time to fill the critical positions Should we wait forever? JAPA syndrome. Okay, now we know JAPA. We've come to live with JAPA. So in filling critical positions occupied by people who have JAPA, how long does it take us in HR to fill those positions? Another key metric perhaps might be the rate of success or overall leadership transitions. How quickly are we able to get managers to be onboarded or inducted, or handheld or mentored and coached, as they go into a transition role? And this is where coaching, effective leadership coaching, comes into place, and the effectiveness of the coaching itself can be measured. And so when we look at all these metrics or indicators, ideas say they provide good insights into the health and the impact of the succession planning efforts that we bring to any particular organization. But like I said, not in any particular order. There are quite a number, but I believe these are some of the most important metrics or indicators. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll take the second question again. You've answered the first question absolutely. The second one says, in what areas will an organization find the services of external HR consultants useful, especially in the succession planning? Would you like to take that? You are muted now, Titi. You may need to unmute.
I don't know if you want me to do free advertisement within this space. And if I'm doing that, I don't know who I'll be doing the advert for. But there are various areas. So first of all, in terms of strategic planning, anytime we use the word strategy, I found that many people don't even understand it or understand it well enough. And many people are not good at having those strategic plans in place. So strategic planning is a good area where HCP, for example, can come in. And again, why a good consultant? Because they know it and they have their own lens or their own methodology of assessing what goes on within an organization. Another benefit or impact of having a consultant coming would be with regards the assessment, the type of assessment methodologies or tools that are used. So succession assessments or talent identification using particular specialized assessment tools and methodologies. Another one, of course, relating to what I said at the very beginning is developing a good consulting organization or consultant or specialized in this area will be able to develop the competency model that is apt for that organization. Many people don't understand competencies. And so this unique area is one area I dare say most organizations should give a bit of budget attention to, so that a good competency model can be developed in that regard. And why is that necessary? It's because the consultant in doing this can conduct competency model exercises, do a good competency map in identifying the critical skills, the knowledge, skills, and attributes, like I said earlier, and especially those areas require as pertinent to effective leadership within the organization, and so integrates them into the succession planning process. Another advantage of having consultants coming is something I believe HCP even does well. I know HCP is very good at assessment and talent identification, but they're also good in terms of development programs and training. So bringing external consultants to design programs and training specific to the organization, not a cut and paste, but one that is relevant within the strategic plan or agenda for that organization in developing future leaders. And another area would be obviously in terms of having a proper succession plan designed and implemented. I believe these are some of those important areas that having those who know how to do this work best, bringing them in to do this will be very important. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Titi, for that list of ways that external consultants can be used here. And I'm sure some people in the audience will be saying, well, we can do this ourselves. Remember that when it comes to succession planning, there are invested interests sometimes. And if we are not careful.
Sorry, Shehu, if I just bought in that,
Go ahead.
people saying we can do this ourselves. Yes, that's the normal thing we hear. But an external consultant brings a unique aspect, and that's the change management aspect of making sure all these interventions, well, you have people looking with a separate lens, and that's where the change management aspect comes in, because it's an external eye that can see how these steps I've iterated earlier, how it fits into a best fit for the organization. And then, having done that, make sure it's sustainable. How do we do that? Some of the things we've developed, we make sure that there's continuity internally. And so, yes, we've done our job, but we hold your hands in the process. And when we exit, after you've paid us our money, we then leave you well established so that you can continue the process, and especially evaluating the impact of the work that the consultants have done. Thanks, Shehu.
Thank you very much, Titi, for that answer to the question. And we're going to open the lines for questions. I have 7 questions already in the chat room, but Tomini Uni has a question to ask, so I'll give you the opportunity to ask that question. Afterwards, I would ask the questions in the Q&A session. So please, everyone, please can you go ahead and put your questions in the Q&A session. I have 7, and I think we have just about a few more minutes to go. So quickly run through the Q&A session. Tomini, over to you.
Thank you very much for the honor. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Great. So great topic, great panel. Thank you very much. I was thinking of which are the best organizations in the world to learn from when it comes to the topic of succession planning. And of course, I hear from all the panel speakers, the multinationals. But I think we need to learn from the multinationals of the football world. Now, for those who do it well in the football world, we see that they consistently overachieve. Now, why I think we should learn from them is, my second point is that those guys have to be honest because they need to win trophies. In the multinationals of this world, it's still possible for the leadership to not be too honest. For example, and again, there's no perfect organization, but in the competitive sports world, they know that if they make a mistake and bring in the wrong person, either from inside or outside, it could come back to bite them. So they are a little bit more objective. Of course, there could be issues between a coach and one player because he didn't follow the regime of exercise or something. But almost like 95% of the way, they are honest with their feedback. They are honest with their exercise regime. They are honest with the promises they made about you will play consistently, you will be in the first team, blah, blah, blah. So 2 things for me from everything that's been discussed is, if we can get to the near perfect organization where leaders are honest and strategic succession planning, like Titi has been underlining, is done, then of course, whether it's JAPA or no JAPA, whether it's technology disrupting us or not, we would always be able to at least achieve about 70–80% outcome from our succession planning. Of course, you have to leave the rest to uncertainties.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you very much for that contribution. Thank you very much for that contribution. Obviously, that analogy rings a lot of bells, those of us who are sport lovers. We'll rush straight to the questions. There's a very interesting question, and Rennie, I would really appreciate if you can take this one. The question says, for young companies, have young employees, because we know you deal with a lot of young employees, and do not necessarily have the funding to attract experienced candidates. How should they go about succession planning? How do you think you go about that?
Thank you, Shehu.
Thank
So I think I'm going to go back to my point about career progression. You know, one of the things that I've learned in my experience here at Flutterwave is internal knowledge is just as valuable as external knowledge. You know, having people who can grow through the ranks is just as important as going out there and getting somebody externally. So if you're a young organization, your first point of call doesn't have to be going out into the market to find external talent. You know, identify what are those skills that you are looking for. How can you enable and equip your internal employees to grow into those future leadership roles? Again, you're not going to wake up today and tomorrow you're going to have the leaders or the talent that you're expecting. It's all about progression, continuing to grow, continuing to foster an environment in which there's continuous growth and development. So again, I think we've mentioned it before, but it's about finding that balance. How do you balance getting the right external talent, but also balancing the internal knowledge and experience that you have inside? I say, for us at Flutterwave, for example, there's a lot of internal knowledge that people have learned and garnered over their experience in time. That's how people have gotten to the leadership point. Not all of our leaders are people we've gone out and recruited externally. I have people who started off as graduate trainees and are now in leadership positions, be it managers, senior managers, whomever, and they've taken the time to go there. As an organization, we've invested in their growth and development to enable them fulfill those leadership responsibilities. So I think regardless of where you are, what stage you are in your career as an organization, it's all about enabling and fostering an environment in which people can learn and grow and develop until they get to that point where they can assume those leadership responsibilities. So find the right balance for you based on the reality of your business today.
Thank you very much for that answer. I believe that addresses the issue. I'm going to the next question, and this is coming from Olumide Fadebi, and he's talking about it with relation to the culture. Yes.
I think there's a poll that is supposed to be running now. It will be while panelists are addressing questions. There's a poll that will be posted right now for participants to please respond to. So the two will be going on
simultaneously.
Okay. Thank you.
Right. I will launch the poll right away. I think I have done that, and I'll take the next one. Thank you very much for that. Yes. So the next question, let me go back to it. Apologies. Yes. Now, Sir Abiodun, this question goes to you, sir, and it has to do with the Nigerian culture, especially in Nigeria. They said that in a country where when succession planning is in place, your line manager will think as though you want to take his job. And of course, you are working towards firing him. Do you think that that transfer of knowledge is possible from the successor to, sorry, from the position holder to the successor? Is it really possible? This is just paraphrasing. Did you get the question, sir?
You are muted.
So you may need to unmute yourself.
Hello?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Go for it.
Yes. Basically, if I take it from the public service perspective,
yes,
that you are the next to me does not necessarily confirm you will be the one to take my seat. You know, I mentioned it that we have a very big service where you could be in a particular point at a time and at another time you are off the point. But what is important is the movement. You need to move so that you can garner sufficient experience and exposures that will perfectly make you the right fit when vacancies exist. I know very well, without being verbose, that a few of the panelists will know how Lagos State does it when it comes to even taking appointive positions. It's a whole lot of process, and we only play the role of observers in court when it is done. So they come up eventually with those who are actually fit for purpose and who are trainable to take responsibilities at the highest level of authority. So basically, if you are in the public service, for instance, and you see the fact that you are next to a permanent secretary, that makes you a permanent secretary. You are only undoing yourself. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that response. Thank you very much. And I'm sure that because we have addressed it at that large scale in Nigeria, I'm sure it's applicable in organization. Tope Phillips, I will be taking the next question, and this is a very interesting one. He said, how does HR plan succession planning when the MD does not see its importance?
And how does HR plan? Say that again, please.
Yeah, he said, how does HR plan succession when the MD does not believe in it or does not see its importance?
Oh, okay, thank you. I think answering this question will be very simple and straightforward. And I'd like, again, to speak to practitioners of HR, like most of us here are. I think it's about what is our understanding and our role of succession planning, in succession planning. And then that's only when we can then begin to talk about the MD not believing in it. I think to a very large extent, I mean, what I have seen is, as HR practitioners, we think it starts and ends with us. And until that changes, MDs, leadership, line managers, and which is the approach that I like to use, line managers will never believe in it. How transparent are succession planning strategies, processes, policies? How much of it do we throw out for people to know? How do we get their buy-in if we do not explain to them what is a need for them? To a very large extent, you will find resistance from line managers, from the MD, from directors, because they don't fully understand the impact of it for the business, for business survival. You know, a lot of the times as HR practitioners, we sit in the boardroom, we sit at meetings, and we only discuss numbers, as though those numbers would fall from heaven, as though you don't need people to deliver those numbers. So for me, very simple things. You must let the business understand the impact of succession management to business agility, particularly in the times that we are now as an HR practitioner. You must let the MD know what it is in it for him, because for him, and for most MDs, it's about the numbers. It's about top and bottom line. But in gradual education, in transparency, right? In terms of making everyone understand the process and what is in need for you as an individual, as a line manager, why it needs to be part of your day-to-day work. You will not have MDs know. So the easiest way for me is, first, as practitioners, we must begin to think about where is the power base. And for some of these things, as HR people, we think it's power based when you keep information away from them, and then you just go into a meeting and share a template, they don't understand it. They're going to push back. They're going to say, look, it's your job, go do it. But from the beginning, and I say, when we begin to talk about the purpose of the organization, when we're talking about the values of the organization, we must ensure that it's ingrained, that people conversations, people discussions, things that impact people become part of our values. When we list from 1 to 10 values that the organization wants to enforce. When we're talking about, when we're talking about, say, profitability and all of that, how many times as HR people do we bring people discussions into such conversations? Or how many times do we wait, till the end of conversation, and when time is up and they say, oh, HR, okay, what do you have anything? And it's okay, we only have 1 minute and you're off. You see, we must come to the party, we must come to the table as HR practitioners. So for me, I will not put any blame on the MD if he doesn't believe it. I think the HR person needs to look at the process and see how you get the MD into it. That's the only way to succeed. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Phillips. Absolutely, yes. We have a lot of work to do convincing management, and we must not only tell, we must show that we understand the business and we must be part of that business. Thank you very much. My next question goes to you, Titi, and this person specifically said to Titi, he said, I would love Titi to kindly expatiate on what competency framework entails. And is it just performance tracking, or does it have more factors to them? That's what the person said. It's an anonymous attendee.
Okay. It's a pity the person is anonymous, but this again would have been a good opportunity to sell. So first of all, I gave a simple definition of what all of us should know about understanding what competency means. KSA is about the knowledge, it's about the skills, and it's about the attitude or attributes. But in modern day HR, we call it those behavioral things. And today, when we talk of behavioral competencies, some companies do a good job in making sure those behavioral competencies are aligned with not just their strategic plan, but what they want to see within the organization. So some behavioral competencies are mapped in such a way that an organization says this year, these are the competencies, generic competencies we want to focus on. So discipline or integrity, teamwork, and service loyalty, for example. So it cuts across from the top to the bottom. Everybody within the organization we're looking at how those behaviors are exhibited in day-to-day reality. Now, within the competency framework, I just gave an example about generic competencies. There are what we call technical competencies. These are competencies required for you as an individual to thrive on the job. So it's about your knowledge. Yes, we all went to school, but how do you apply that knowledge? What new knowledge are you bringing into space? I just said, in today's world, we have new competencies that are evolving, by the way. Agility, thought agility, leadership agility, and things like that. Today, you have competencies that have to do with inclusivity. So again, a competency framework for an organization is not something that's cast in stone. It's something that evolves, not just with the organization, with the talent, but with also what's happening outside. Another competency, for example, because we talk about JAPA and whatever, is digital fluency and even remote leadership skills. Now, people are like, whoa, yeah, because COVID, see what COVID has thrown us into. But who would have thought of those competencies if you're not agile in your thought and all that? So the competency framework includes a lot of things. It starts with the needs assessment, looking at the gaps, competency gaps, and then you come up with how to fill in those gaps, the matrix, and how you align the competency framework development into those specific areas of knowledge, skills, and behavioral attribute. And 3 big areas of competencies within an organization. You must have your behavioral competencies or generic competencies common to everybody. So you know what you're measuring for everybody or the culture you want to bring into place. And then of course, the knowledge and the skills. The skill part is how do you apply what you know? And I'm sure we know as practitioners, knowledge or knowledge transfer, that we talk of the 70-20-10 rule. 70% of how we learn in our organization is on the job. So again, even for these leaders, we mentioned earlier, make it part of their KPIs. So how are they bringing this to bear? And then 20% of how we learn in an organization is through coaching and mentoring. And that's where the likes of an executive coach like me come into place, you know, and then it's only 10%, but that's about the classroom training. I'll just stop there for now because of time. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that explanation. And of course, I believe that the anonymous attendee has his answer to that question. If you need more of that, you can reach us in HCP. We'll have enough use of that view as well. Competency framework is a lecture on its own, and we don't have much time. For those of us who are still filling the poll, we only have 47% participation, so please, as much as possible, participate. And we have completely run out of time, but I'll just take 2 more questions very quickly. The next question actually goes to Udom. Udom, there's this very interesting question on diversity. He said, should a hypo be sacrificed despite having a natural next in line because of its diversity? How do we ensure diversity does not lead to selection exclusion in succession planning? This is a very, very interesting question, also from an anonymous attendee.
Yeah, before I address that, please just give me 1 minute to go back to the question about the MD who does not believe or value succession plans or people issues.
Okay.
I don't think we need to gloss over that. I like the response that was provided by Tope, but I'm not satisfied. As an HR practitioner, I will advise that HCP should identify the candidates or the person who asked that question and have a follow-up with such an MD, because in this era, at this time, to have somebody running an organization and trying to ignore such an important issue is very disappointing. And we cannot be looking in the direction of HR. Succession planning is a management responsibility. So I just thought I should make that point.
Thank you very much.
When it comes to diversity, people get frightened whenever we're talking about diversity. Diversity can never triumph over competence. But diversity is also important for the health of an organization. Organizations are large. You know, I did make a comment about, you know, people being afraid of change, people resisting change, which is a familiar cliche. That is not true. What people tend to resist is when a change results in a loss, either of position or favors or what have you. So, and we've seen this happen severally, even within the public sector. For 2 years, I was asked by the former president or the presidency to represent the private sector in interviews of would-be federal permanent secretaries. And I can tell you that experience was an eye-opener, because I got confronted with highly talented, qualified people. And none of the people we interviewed, it did not matter where they came from. None of them were rejected by the presidency. They all made it. There is always talent. You know, it is only when individuals feel that they have not been positioned to benefit that they start complaining. I have 3 daughters. And they are damn smarter than I am. So what is telling me that if I'm running an organization and I require one of them to lead that organization based on competency, I should be looking in the direction of a male child. So we should stop this, you know, stereotyping. Diversity is good, and everybody who is talented, so long as you subject them to a process, deserves to be in a position. Nobody's taking your position. If you are good, they will give you another role. That has been my experience. We promoted female employees, and I can tell you they were all competent. We had a Nigerian geologist who was identified by ExxonMobil Corporation and made a vice president. From Nigeria, schooled in Nigeria, became a vice president in Houston. In Nigeria, probably, especially in the public sector or some organizations, they will be talking about, oh, she's female. No. Let's not do that, not in this era, not when we have people like Rennie, showing us the way.
Thank you very much for that response. I'm sure that will be a debate for another day. There is a lot of issues around this. A lot of people also still believe that if you follow competence alone, you may just have a diversity skew sometimes. And I'm sure one of our member of panelists may want to weigh in on that, just to clarify a bit more. You've been given a task to do to ensure that there is inclusion, there is diversity, and of course there is equity. And then of course, when you put it side by side, competence, it is not all the time that balance comes in. So we'll have that conversation some other time. I have a question for Innocent. The economic climate has made the need for organization to run lean very necessary. How can planning succession in a very new organization be possible? How can we achieve that? And we have very short time. We're out of time. Hopefully in the next 2 minutes we should be done. Yes, sir.
Yeah, when we're talking about economic climate affecting organizations to run lean, lean necessary. But the point is that whether we are running lean or we're not running lean, it's important for you to ensure that you have a succession plan in place. Leaning means that you're running with less people. It then also means that for the important thing for you is that how many roles within the organization are critical. Now, like I said, the critical role in every organization, like I said at the beginning, is there are between 13 and 15% of the roles in an organization, usually. Some of them are for leadership roles at the leadership level. Some are not at the leadership level, and they are the lower level, but they are very, very critical to the business. You just must ensure that sometimes you may need to over-recruit. Sometimes you may need to over-retain people in the, as long as there is no role that is just one person, that by the time the person disappears, the organization begins to suffer, because what it will cost you to replace that role will be almost 2 times or 3 times what it costs you to be able to, what you have invested in ensuring that you have a succession health. What we're talking about is that no matter whether you are running lean or you are not running lean, you must constantly be looking at the succession health of your organization and ensure that there are people that are constantly being developed for all the critical positions in the business. So that may require that you over-recruit, you over-retain people in the system on an ongoing basis. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that response. And I have a few minutes to my audience. Thank you very much for listening so far. There is one very important question, and I'll really need an SSS response, short, sweet, and simple. And Titi, I'll come back to you if you don't mind. This is a question that has to do with attrition rate, the contrast or the conflict between attrition rate and succession plan. This person is saying, how can succession planning be achieved where the attrition rate is very high? You have invested in developing people, you have a fantastic succession plan in place. People are not necessarily leaving the organization because of its culture, they are leaving the country. And so it's high. So how do we manage this? If you don't mind, I would like you to respond. And any other member of the audience can also weigh in after this response.
Okay, thank you, Shehu. So attrition obviously is something that has to be planned for strategically. And therefore, because it's planned for, it has to be well managed. Obviously, in today's world, we should anticipate that gone are those days where we say plan for just 2% attrition. In today's world, first of all, you have to do an analysis of your business. So I think it was Tayo that talked of salesmen earlier on. If salesmen your key workforce, your cash cows. So attrition, a higher percentage of attrition has to be planned in that regard. So again, attrition also, how we measure it brings in different things. It's not a linear way that we used to do in those days. So attrition brings it to bear a lot of things. One of the things is about the culture. People say culture eats strategy, or strategy eats culture, or culture is the way we do things here. So in today's world, I just spoke earlier when I was talking about competences, and I said competencies have to evolve with the times, or even think ahead, plan ahead, and come up with those competencies that will be needed 3 years from today, 5 years from today. And I mentioned competencies like digital fluency, for example, thought leadership, and remote leadership skills as competencies, you know. So in looking at attrition, I would want to take a step back, and rather than say, I expect this percentage of attrition, maybe as practitioners, we should ask ourselves, imagine if there's no attrition in my organization. Imagine if I limit attrition to 2% in my organization, as opposed to my competitor who's doing 5 or 8, you know. What should we start doing differently? So in other words, it's about an agile workforce and leadership and agility within the HR space that brings in, attrition is planned for. So because we plan for it, what should I start doing differently within that space so that attrition doesn't hit me like a tsunami? And so because it's not hitting me like a tsunami, it won't affect the bottom line, or even it won't affect the engagement levels within my workforce. So which is another important aspect. So with remote working and all that, how do I make sure my employees across all demographies are engaged while still working remotely so as to minimize my attrition level? So again, my simple answer is, number one, let's redefine attrition. And so it's not so much about managing attrition, it's about even planning of how do I mitigate attrition. Of course, it comes with thinking outside the box also. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that response. And by that response, we come to the end of this discussion. Thank you very much, our panelists, for spending time with us and hanging out with us. I'm sure that out of the 104 audience, we had an engaged audience. We had about 106, and we still have about 104 up until now. The poll has been, I think we have about 67% performance or responses for our poll. So we could see the feedback out there. We'll just take this information and of course we'll process it. So thank you very much, Rennie. Thank you for your time. Abiodun, thank you so much, sir, for your time. Topper Phillips, thank you very much for your time and of course for the information you've shared. Anudon, thank you so much for the wealth of experience you have also shared in this particular session. And of course, Innocent, thank you very much for the time you have spent with us and the information you have shared with us. Hopefully, this is also going to help the listeners to be able to implement and of course to be able to take home the idea of succession planning and implement it in their organization. Thank you. Human Capital Partners actually can support you in this area, especially our advisory arm of the business. We handle succession planning for a couple of organizations at the various levels, either at the identification level, at the selection level, at the development level, and of course to provide support around engagement, consistent engagement, and of course managing the employees' expectation. We perform a whole lot around that. Even competency framework development, we are involved heavily in that. We've done that for a couple of organizations locally and of course multinationals. and we are sure we can handle this for you. So please feel free. I'll just share my screen in case you have such need. Please reach out to us and we'll be happy to help. Be happy to help. So this is the address and the emails. You could just take a screenshot of this and we are good. Once again, our panelists, thank you very much for your time. And then of course, those at the back end as well, we appreciate you. Audience, thank you very much for spending time with us. Have a wonderful day ahead. Bye.